Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Erin Gaugler, like Brady said, and I am a doctoral candidate studying under Doctors Kevin Sedivec and Miranda Meehan. And in our work with producers, we have found that many are interested in cropping practices like cover crops that promote soil health, but they can often be deterred by the costs that are associated with this non-traditional cropping system. So to put us sort of all on the same page, cover crops can be broadly defined as any non-cash crop grown in addition to or in lieu of the primary cash crop. So these crops are popularly known for their soil health benefits, such as enhancing soil fertility, reducing soil erosion, improving soil structure, and water infiltration. Really overall, just bringing back resiliency into that system. In recent years, the USDA has put forth an initiative to promote the adoption of cover crops by providing financial assistance to producers. The displayed graph is an example of EQIP dollars spent on the y-axis and fiscal year on the x-axis. EQIP is one example of a federal program which promotes conservation practices, and as you can see, funding has increased by approximately $150 million from 2005 to 2018. Now, according to the USDA, the popularity of cover crops has continued to grow. And in fact, they suggest that the adoption rate has increased by about 50% from 2012 to 2017. However, this is a pretty broad statement, and it overwhelms the fact that the adoption rates as a share of harvested acreage continue to vary a great deal across the United States and within each state. And in fact, when we break things down and look at the percentage of cropland acres that were sown to cover crops, in 2017, this number represented 5% of those cropland acres. Now, the incorporation of cover crops proposes several ecological benefits to the system. Producers, however, aren't often quick to implement a practice that doesn't bring them a direct return on their investment. And while there is funding currently available through state and federal programs like EQIP, it is not always a reliable or consistent source. Research suggests that the economic benefits of cover cropping may not be realized if livestock are not incorporated into the system. Livestock not only enhance nutrient cycling, but they can also reduce input costs. For example, the manure is spread while cattle is grazing across the field. Additionally, that cover crop is extending the grazing season and reducing livestock feeding costs. In the Northern Great Plains, there is a limited amount of information to support these producers in making management decisions. So we developed a producer-led project to identify the impacts of livestock grazing in an annual cropping system. We wanted to know how grazing management practices would impact soil health, crop production, livestock performance, and economics. A 3-year project was initiated in the spring of 2020, and it included 2 years of a full season annual forage cover crop, followed by a cash crop. Locations were developed across central North Dakota to test grazing density treatments in a split plot design. So 3 of the producers represented a high stock density, while 3 producers represented a moderate stock density. Additionally, 2 forage utilization rates were evaluated at 50% and 75% forage use. We also had a demonstration site in Fargo, and this location included all treatments and all utilization rates. For those of you that are interested, the cover crop mixture included a blend of cool and warm season grasses, broadleaf crops, and legume species. And the total rate applied was 39 pounds per acre. So the idea was that this mixture would create a diversity, it would minimize risk due to weather conditions, it would extend the grazing period due to different growth stages, and it could potentially maximize soil health benefits. To measure the impacts of livestock grazing on soil health, we wanted to evaluate both physical and chemical aspects. Livestock grazing on cropland acres is often thought to cause soil compaction, so we measured bulk density and aggregate stability. We also took measurements of water infiltration to observe how water moved through that soil profile. With regards to soil nutrients, we wanted to understand how the grazing density treatments might impact nutrient distribution. So samples were collected across every single acre of all of the field locations. Crop and forage production was determined by clipping. The available biomass was used to determine carrying capacities and assign grazing density treatments, and we also clipped at the end of the grazing season to determine forage utilization. Livestock performance was evaluated pre and post grazing by assessing the animal's body condition with a visual scoring system that ranged from 1 through 9. The assessment is used to determine the animal's nutritional status. In Fargo, we were also able to collect livestock weights pre and post grazing, and this was used to calculate their average daily gain. Just as a side note, in general, grazing turnout of those cover crops occurred from August to early October of each year. Now, I want to note before I get into a project update that our focus for this project is on evaluating the change over time as it pertains to each location. And currently we are working our way through the second grazing season, so there's still quite a bit of data to collect before we can really make any major conclusions. However, I do think it's important to share what we've learned and experienced so far. So starting with the growing season conditions, on your screen you should see the departure from normal rainfall, which is based on the 30-year average for each location. I summarized this information by totaling the rainfall for the months of May through July and comparing it to that 30-year average. As you can see, spring conditions were overwhelmingly dry for most locations during 2020 and 2021. The only location that didn't start with a major deficit of subsoil moisture at the beginning of the project was Fargo. Next is the departure from normal rainfall for the months of August through October. And as you can see, the dry conditions persisted through 2020. However, most locations were finally able to catch some rain in the fall of 2021. Next up is forage production, which is reported in pounds per acre according to each location. Now, in most cases, as subsoil moisture became more limited, forage production also suffered. And aside from the growing season conditions, I do think that it's important to note that field conditions, whether that be differences in soil type, cropping history, management, etc., are quite variable from site to site, and some of this may be reflected in the forage yields. So again, I'd like to remind you that for this project, we're focused on evaluating the change over time as it pertains to each location. And if there is an opportunity to extract data from a similar soil series so that we can look at big picture implications, then that would be something that we might consider later. Just as a side note, we're no longer able to work with the producer Napoleon, so that's why that information is not available. As far as what we have left to do, we will be collecting soil samples in the spring to evaluate the impact of grazing management practices on soil health. The cash crop will be probably corn, and that can be harvested as grain or silage, and then we will collect yield data on that crop. And then next winter, we'll pull together the data and begin to analyze and share what we have been finding. Now, before I close, I just wanted to point out that one of the biggest lessons we've learned is just the need to be adaptable, especially when working with producers. you know, whether it's been challenges related to communication, dealing with drought and plant toxicity like we experienced this last year, or in 2020, we had an early frost in September. You know, all of those different things come into play, and at the end of the day, we still have a responsibility to work with these landowners and to meet the nutritional needs of those livestock. And sometimes that means that changes have to be made to our protocol. So with all of that being said, it's been a real privilege to work with these producers, and I am excited to continue learning with them. If any of you are interested in learning more about these types of practices that integrate crops and livestock, or want to follow along as we continue with this project, feel free to contact me. It's something that I've really enjoyed doing and would be more than happy to share with you. So with that, I'll close and thank you for your time today.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Erin.